What if the man you loved, the one who promised you forever, threw you onto the street the moment you told him you were carrying his child? She was Ariana Velasco, the perfect wife to a self-made billionaire, living a fairy tale in the heart of New York City. But on a single, brutal night of cold rain, and even colder words, her fairy tale turned into a nightmare. She was left with nothing but a broken heart and a secret growing inside her. But what her husband never knew, what the world never knew, was that the penniless young woman he discarded was about to inherit a legacy of power so immense it could shatter his entire world. This isn't a story of revenge. This is a story of rebirth. Stay with us to witness how the rejected wife returns as a multi-billion-dollar titan, ready to claim everything she was owed. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss this astonishing transformation, from consort to chairman. Ariana's life was a symphony of soft tones and expensive, muffled sounds. It was the gentle purr of Lucas de la Riva's Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding through Manhattan traffic, the quiet deference of staff in their sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, the delicate chime of champagne flutes at galas, where she was more of an accessory than a participant. Lucas de la Riva hadn't just married her, he had curated her. Ariana Marble, an orphan with a scholarship and a heart full of art history, met Lucas at a university charity event. He was a rising star in the fintech world, a man who built his empire, De La Riva Holdings, from the ground up with ruthless efficiency. He was captivated by her quiet grace, her genuine smile, and what he called her unspoiled nature. To him, she was a beautiful, pure canvas on which he could paint his vision of a perfect life. She, in turn, had fallen for his ambition, his intellectual sharpness, and the vulnerability she occasionally saw flicker behind his steely gray eyes. She believed she was his sanctuary, the calm for his storm. Their first 2 years of marriage were a luxurious blur. He adorned her with Chanel and Cartier, but her world remained small, confined to managing his household, organizing his business dinners, and waiting for him. She traded her dreams of being a museum curator for being a curator of guest lists. Still, she was happy, or so she told herself. She loved him and believed his consuming work was for them, for their future. The moment that changed everything came on a crisp October morning. The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like the perfect final brushstroke on the masterpiece of their life. A child, a piece of both of them, a reason for Lucas to finally slow down, be present, and build a home instead of just an empire. She planned the reveal meticulously. She booked a table at Per Se, their favorite restaurant, the same one where he had proposed. She wore the sapphire blue dress he loved, the delicate fabric clinging to a figure that hadn't yet begun to show the secret she held. He arrived late, an hour late. When he finally slid into the booth, he didn't apologize. His eyes were already scanning his phone. "I'm sorry, Ariana. The merger with Sterling Iberica is at a critical stage. We're on the knife's edge." "Lucas?" she began, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to reach for his across the table. "I have news. Wonderful news." He finally looked up, his focus turning to her, but his gaze was impatient. "What is it?" Her heart thumped against her ribs. This wasn't how she had imagined it. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby." The reaction was not what she expected. There was no joy, no excitement. Instead, a mask of cold calculation descended upon his face. The warmth of the restaurant seemed to vanish. He slowly withdrew his hand from hers. "A baby?" he said, the words flat, devoid of feeling. Now, it wasn't a question. It was a statement of profound inconvenience. "I thought you'd be happy," she stammered, the smile faltering on her lips. "Happiness is a luxury, Ariana. We are in the middle of the biggest deal of my life," he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone. "The merger with Sterling Corp is everything. It will make us legends." He was talking about Isabella Sterling, the Wall Street shark, a woman as famous for her ruthless tactics as her Ice Queen beauty. Ariana had met her once at a benefit. Isabella had looked at her as if she were transparent, her eyes dismissing Ariana as a piece of trim on Lucas's arm. Lucas had been working closely with her for months, and a knot of unease had been tightening in Ariana's stomach, with every late night he attributed to merger talks. "But this is our life, Lucas, not just a deal," Ariana pleaded softly. He sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "You don't understand the scale of what is happening. A child complicates things. The timing is appalling." The word appalling hit her like a physical blow. The rest of the dinner was a blur of silence. The exquisite food tasted like ash in her mouth. Back in the penthouse, the silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Ariana tried to tell herself, "He's just stressed. The news was a shock. He'll come around." He had to. But a week later, the true nature of her gilded cage began to reveal itself. She found a receipt from Asprey Jewelers, not for the simple locket she had admired last month, but for a custom-designed diamond necklace, a piece so extravagant it was clearly meant to seal a deal or a heart. It wasn't for her. The final crack appeared when she overheard a phone call. Lucas was in his study, the door slightly ajar. His voice was different, softer, tinged with an intimacy he hadn't shown her in years. "Of course, Isabella," he was saying. "Everything is being handled. No, she won't be an issue. Consider it a loose end being tied up. The future is Sterling de la Riva. The future is us. A loose end." That was her and her unborn child. The floor seemed to drop out beneath her. The beautiful penthouse with its panoramic views suddenly felt like a prison, the highest tower in a castle of lies. The symphony of her life had just hit a devastating, discordant note, and she knew with a bone-chilling certainty that the storm was about to break. Quick question for the audience. If you were Ariana, knowing what you now know, should you have confronted him in that moment, or fled in silence? I meant your strategy below. The night of betrayal. The storm broke 2 nights later. It was a Tuesday, a night of relentless driving rain that lashed against the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the tempest in Ariana's soul. She had decided to confront him. Fear was a cold, coiled snake in her stomach, but the thought of living one more day in this beautiful, empty lie was worse. She waited for him in the vast living room, the city lights a blurred watercolor through the rain-streaked glass. She hadn't turned on many lights. The room was dim, just like her marriage. When Lucas finally walked in just after midnight, shaking water from his Burberry trench coat, he seemed surprised to see her awake. "Ariana, you should be in bed," he said, his tone dismissive as he loosened his tie. "We need to talk, Lucas," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. He tossed his coat onto a pristine white sofa. "I'm exhausted. Whatever it is, it can wait." "No," she said, stepping into a strip of light. "It can't. I heard you on the phone with Isabella Sterling. You called me a loose end." His movement stilled. He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw no pretense in his eyes. There was no trace of love, no hint of regret. There was only the cold, hard glare of a businessman assessing a failed investment. "You shouldn't eavesdrop," he said calmly. "You are having an affair with her," Ariana stated, the words tasting like poison. He didn't deny it. He walked to the bar, poured a glass of Macallan 25, and took a slow sip. An affair is such a vulgar term. It's an alliance, a partnership. Isabella and I understand each other. We speak the same language: power, ambition, legacy. And what language do we speak, Lucas? Love? Family? Or was that just a lie you told to acquire a pretty piece for your collection? Her voice broke, the pain finally cracking her composure. You were perfect for a time, he conceded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You were gentle, modest. You made a beautiful home. But my world has moved past that. The Sterling de la Riva merger isn't just a business, Ariana. It's a dynasty. And a dynasty requires a queen, not a consort. The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. A queen? And what about your son? Doesn't your dynasty require an heir? He set the glass down with a sharp click. The child, he said, his voice laced with venom, is a complication I cannot afford. A messy, emotional tie to a past I'm about to erase. Isabella and I will have children when the timing is right. Children raised in power, not clinging to sentimentality. Ariana felt the blood drain from her face. You cannot be serious. You would discard your own child. I am discarding a problem, he corrected her, his eyes locked on hers. And that problem is you. You no longer fit the blueprint of my life. He walked to his desk and pulled a document from a leather-bound folder. He slid it across the polished mahogany table. It was a prenuptial agreement. Her signature was at the bottom, a blurry script from a naive girl in love 2 years ago. You will recall you signed this, he said. It's quite ironclad. You relinquished all rights to my assets. However, for your silence and swift departure, I am prepared to offer you a one-time settlement of $50,000. You will sign an NDA, disappear, and this inconvenience will be resolved. $50,000. Hush money. For her silence, for her marriage, for his child. The insult was so profound it almost made her laugh. I don't want your money, she whispered, her body shaking from a mix of rage and heartbreak. No? His eyebrow arched. Suit yourself, then you get nothing. As of this moment, this is no longer your home. My security will escort you. It was happening so fast her mind couldn't process the sheer speed of the destruction. Lucas, please, she begged, tears finally streaming down her face. Think about the baby. Our baby. He looked at her stomach, the place where his son was growing, and his expression was one of absolute revulsion. That is your problem, not mine. He pressed a button on the intercom. Jaime, please come to the living room. 2 large men in dark suits entered the room almost immediately. They were his personal security detail, men she had once greeted with a friendly smile. Now their faces were impassive stone. Mrs. de la Riva is leaving, Lucas announced. Please escort her off the premises. She is not to take anything but the clothes she is wearing. Lucas, no! She screamed, a primal, raw cry of disbelief. Jaime and the other guard took a step toward her. She backed away, her hands protectively covering her stomach. You can't do this. I just did, Lucas said, turning his back to look at the storm. You have 5 minutes to leave under your own volition, or you will be removed. The finality in his voice broke her. There was nothing left to fight for here. The man she loved didn't exist. Maybe he never did. This cold, monstrous stranger was all that was left. With her last shred of dignity, she turned and walked toward the door, the guards flanking her like jailers. She did not look back. She couldn't bear to see the man who had just shattered her entire existence standing there victorious among the ruins. The elevator ride felt like a descent into hell. The lobby was empty, the doorman averting his gaze in shame. Then, the heavy glass doors opened, and she was pushed outside. Not gently escorted, but pushed. She stumbled onto the pavement of Fifth Avenue, into the heart of the storm. The cold rain hit her instantly, plastering her thin silk blouse to her skin, soaking her through in seconds. She had no coat, no purse, no phone. The 50,000 euros he had offered, and she had refused, was a ghost gesture. He had intended for her to leave with nothing. She stood there trembling and drenched, cars hissing past and throwing up plumes of dirty water. She looked up at the penthouse, a beacon of light high in the sky. Her home, and now she was just another piece of garbage thrown into the street. Pregnant, alone, and utterly broken, Ariana de la Riva ceased to exist. In her place was a ghost, haunted by a life no longer hers, with nowhere in the world to go. The Cartier bracelet and the lifeline. The first few days were a blur of shock-induced numbness. The city that had once been her playground became a concrete labyrinth of indifference. The rain-soaked night faded into a cold, gray dawn. Ariana headed to the subway, not to go anywhere, but for the relative warmth and anonymity it provided. She rode the trains for hours, a specter among the morning commuters, her mind replaying Lucas's cruel words on a torturous loop. A loose end, a problem. Not my child. Hunger gnawed at her, a primal ache that sharpened the edges of her desperation. She had no money. Not a single penny. The Cartier love bracelet on her wrist, a first anniversary gift from Lucas, felt like a cruel joke. She stared at it, the gold glinting under the flickering fluorescent lights of the train car. It was a shackle to a life that had tried to destroy her. With trembling hands, she found a pawn shop in a grubby corner of the city. The man behind the bulletproof glass barely looked at her. His eyes focused on the bracelet. He offered her a fraction of its value, a few $100s. She took it without haggling. The money felt both filthy and salvational. With it, she bought a cheap coat, a hot meal she could barely swallow, and a room in a dilapidated motel where the sheets were thin and smelled of bleach. For the first time in 48 hours, she was alone in a room with a locked door. The dam of her composure finally broke. She curled into a ball on the lumpy mattress and wept for the husband she had lost, for the baby who deserved so much more, and for the woman she no longer was. The next week was a lesson in survival. She learned which shelters offered a hot meal without too many questions, which libraries allowed her to rest for hours without being evicted. She saw a side of New York she never knew existed, a world of desperation and silent suffering, hidden in the shadow of the skyscrapers she used to call home. Her pregnancy was a constant, terrifying reality. Morning sickness hit her hard, and without proper nutrition, she felt weak and dizzy. The fear for her baby was a physical pain, a constant pressure in her chest that was sharper than her own hunger. She had to do something. She couldn't bring a child into this world of homelessness and despair. One afternoon, sitting in the New York Public Library, using a computer to search for women's shelters, she found one with a good reputation. Hope House. It offered support for pregnant women and new mothers. It was her only hope. Life at Hope House was humbling. She shared a small, clean room with one other woman, a teenager who had run away from home. Ariana did her chores, attended therapy sessions, and for the first time in a long time, felt a glimmer of security. The women there didn't care about her past. They only saw a fellow survivor. They shared stories, offered support, and created a fragile community bound by shared hardship. Ariana, who had once curated dinners for billionaires, was now learning how to budget $5 for a day's provisions. She was shedding the skin of Mrs. de la Riva and finding a core of resilience she never knew she possessed. She was 3 months pregnant when the lifeline appeared. It came in the form of a crisp, cream-colored envelope sent from a P.O. box she had set up to receive mail. The return address was a prestigious law firm in Midtown Kensington and Associates. Her first thought was that it was from Lucas. Perhaps he was suing her, trying to legally sever his ties to the baby, ensuring she could never make a claim. Her hand trembled as she opened it. The letter was brief and formal. Dear Ms. Marble, we have become involved in a matter of deep and urgent importance concerning your family estate. and a significant trust of which you are the sole beneficiary. We have been searching for you for a considerable time. We understand your circumstances may be delicate and assure you of our utmost discretion. Please contact the undersigned at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting. All costs relating to your travel will be covered. Sincerely, Arthur Kensington. Senior partner, Ms. Marble. Not Mrs. de la Riva. They had used her maiden name. Family estate. Trust. It made no sense. Ariana was an orphan. Her parents, whom she barely remembered, had been graduate students who died in a car crash when she was 3. She had no known family. She read the letter again and again. It had to be a mistake, a cruel scam. But the law firm was real. A quick search on the library computer confirmed it was one of the most respected estate law firms in the country, handling old money fortunes for generations. A small, dangerous spark of hope ignited in the darkness of her despair. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if someone was looking for her? Heart pounding, she used a payphone in the shelter hallway. She dialed the number, her voice barely a whisper when the receptionist answered. "I'm calling for Mr. Arthur Kensington. My name is Ariana Marble." She was put through almost immediately. A kind, elderly voice came on the line. "Ms. Marble, thank God. We have been trying to find you for months. My name is Arthur Kensington. Can you please tell me you are safe?" The genuine concern in his voice was so unexpected, it brought tears to her eyes. "Yes," she choked out. "I'm safe." "Excellent. Can you come to my office, say, tomorrow at 10 a.m.? A car will be waiting for you at whatever address you provide." She gave him the address of a diner a block from the shelter, too ashamed to admit where she truly lived. She hung up the phone, her mind reeling. An abyss had opened beneath her weeks ago, and she had been falling ever since. But now she felt as if someone had thrown her a rope. She didn't know where it led, but for the first time she had something to hold on to. She had no idea that this lifeline wasn't just pulling her out of the dark. It was about to lift her to a stratosphere of power she could not imagine. The Valdivia lineage. Castle. The black Lincoln that pulled up to the diner the next morning was as out of place as Ariana felt. The driver, a man in an immaculate suit, opened the door for her with a respectful nod, addressing her as ma'am. The soft leather seats and the silent, smooth ride were a jarring reminder of the life that had been stolen from her. For a moment, panic seized her. It felt too much like returning to Lucas's world. But the destination was not a penthouse of lies. It was a tower of glass and steel on Park Avenue, the home of Kensington and Associates. Arthur Kensington's office was on the top floor. It wasn't ostentatious like Lucas's, which was all sharp angles and modern art designed to intimidate. This room was filled with old-world elegance, rich mahogany bookshelves crammed with leather-bound volumes, antique maps on the walls, and a large desk that had seen a century of secrets. The man who stood to greet her was in his 70s, with kind eyes, a warm smile, and an impeccably cut suit. "Ms. Marble, Ariana, it is an honor to finally meet you," he said, shaking her hand gently. "Please sit. May I offer you anything? Tea, water?" She simply shook her head, too nervous to speak. She sat on a plush armchair, her worn coat in sharp contrast to the room's opulence. Mr. Kensington sat across from her, his expression a mixture of sympathy and professional gravity. "I know you must have 1,000 questions," he began, "and I know the content of my letter was cryptic. The truth is, Ariana, your life is not what you believe it to be." He opened a thick file folder on his desk. "You were raised believing you were an orphan. Your parents simple graduate students. That is only partially true. Your mother was indeed a student. Your father, however, your father was Miguel Valdivia." The name meant nothing to her. Kensington seemed to expect it. "Miguel Valdivia," he continued softly, was the only son and heir of Don Alistair Valdivia. This name gave her a jolt. Alistair Valdivia. Even Ariana in her isolated world knew that name. He was a legend, a mythical figure in the world of global finance and industry. A reclusive billionaire, often compared to Howard Hughes, who had built an empire so vast and diversified its full reach was unknown. He hadn't been seen in public for over 2 decades. My grandfather? The words felt strange and absurd on her tongue. Yes, Arthur confirmed. Alistair Valdivia is your paternal grandfather. But my parents, they died. I was told there was no one else. Arthur's face softened with sorrow. This is the difficult part of the story. Your grandfather was a formidable, and at times, very controlling man. Your father, Miguel, fell in love with your mother, a brilliant art historian, against Alistair's wishes. He wanted his son to marry into another powerful dynasty. Miguel refused. He chose love over his inheritance. He and your mother eloped, changed their surname to Marble to escape Alistair's influence, and tried to build a life on their own terms. He paused, letting the information sink in. Alistair was proud and stubborn. He severed ties with Miguel. They were estranged for years. When your parents died in that tragic accident, you were only 3. Alistair was consumed by grief and guilt. He tried to find you, but the trail had gone cold. You had been placed in the foster system under the name Ariana Marble. For over 20 years, Alistair has been searching for his lost granddaughter. He spent a fortune, employed the world's best private investigators, all to no avail. Until 3 months ago, he slid a photograph across the desk. It was a picture of a handsome young man with kind eyes, and a woman with a radiant smile holding a tiny girl between them. The little girl was her, and the man, he had her eyes. An investigator finally found your parents' marriage certificate, filed under their real names in a small northern town, Arthur explained. From there, we tracked your journey through the foster system and your scholarship to university. We found your marriage record to Marlucas de la Riva. We were preparing to contact you at your residence when our investigator reported, he reported the distressing events of a few weeks ago. We lost you again until you set up that P.O. box. Ariana, your grandfather was beside himself with worry. Ariana stared at the photograph, her vision blurred by tears. A family. She had a family. A father and mother who had chosen love. A grandfather who had been searching for her. "Where is he?" she whispered. "My grandfather." Arthur's expression became grim. "Alistair passed away 2 months ago, Ariana. I am so very sorry. His final wish, the sole purpose of his later years, was to find you and make amends, to give you the life your father gave up for love." The spark of hope that had ignited in her flickered with a new wave of grief. She had found her family, only to lose them all again. "He never stopped loving his son," Arthur continued gently, "and he never stopped looking for you. He amended his will years ago. In the event of his death, should you be found, you would be his sole heir." Arthur leaned forward, his gaze direct and serious. "Ariana, I don't think you comprehend the magnitude of what this means. Alistair Valdivia didn't just own a few companies. He owned a global conglomerate: shipping, technology, real estate, pharmaceuticals. His net worth was not measured in millions or even single-digit billions. Upon his passing, the estimated value of the Valdivia global estate is over 97 billion euros. The figure was so vast it was meaningless. It was an abstraction. Ariana's mind, which had recently worried about counting change for a meal, simply couldn't process it. 97 billion, she repeated, the words feeling like a foreign language. "That is a conservative estimate," Arthur said, "and it belongs entirely to you. The houses in Geneva, London, and the private island in the Caribbean, the controlling interest in over 50 global corporations, the art collection that rivals a national museum. All of it. You are, to all intents and purposes, one of the richest women in the world. The room began to spin. Ariana gripped the arms of the chair to steady herself. She thought of Lucas, so proud of his self-made millionaire status, fighting for his precious merger to create a dynasty. His entire empire was a rounding error against this. She thought of herself, cold and shaking on a park bench, worrying about how she would feed her child. The irony was so stunning, so cosmically cruel and beautiful, that she began to laugh. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but a wild, unhinged sound of disbelief and shock. It was the sound of a world breaking and reforming in a single, earth-shattering moment. Arthur Kensington watched her, his expression understanding. He had seen fortunes change hands, but never like this. He was witnessing the birth of a new power forged in the crucible of betrayal and despair. When her laughter subsided into shaky breaths, Ariana looked at him, her eyes clear and sharp for the first time that day. The broken, frightened girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had just been handed a lightning bolt. "Mr. Kensington," she said, her voice firm and cold, "tell me everything I need to know. I have a lot of learning to do." Press the like button if the irony of fate has left you breathless. The forging of a titan. The next 5 years were no fairy tale transformation. They were an odyssey. Ariana Valdivia was not born in that legal office. She was forged piece by piece in the fires of ruthless education and quiet determination. Arthur Kensington became her Virgil, guiding her through the intricate circles of her newfound hell and heaven. Her first act was to disappear. The world knew Ariana Marble was gone, and Ariana de la Riva had vanished. A new identity known only to a handful of trusted advisors was created. She moved to her grandfather's secluded estate in Geneva, a stunning chateau overlooking Lake Geneva, ringed with stone walls and secrecy. The first few months were overwhelming. While her body nurtured the new life growing inside her, her mind was a battlefield. She grieved for the grandfather she never knew, poring over his letters, his diaries, trying to understand the brilliant, stubborn man who had shaped her destiny. And she dealt with the trauma of Lucas's betrayal, not with vengeance, but with a cold resolve to never again be that helpless, dependent woman. Arthur assembled a team of the world's finest tutors. A hardened former Goldman Sachs partner taught her finance, not from textbooks, but by dissecting real-time market data. A shrewd corporate lawyer from London taught her strategy, mergers, and the art of the hostile takeover. A former diplomat trained her in negotiation, body language, and the subtle dance of international politics. She devoured information, working 18-hour days, fueled by black coffee and an unyielding desire to become the mistress of her own fate. She wasn't just learning to manage a fortune. She was learning to wield it as a weapon and a shield. 6 months after arriving in Geneva, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with her father's kind eyes. She named her Leah. Holding her daughter for the first time, Ariana made a silent vow. Leah would never know the fear and uncertainty her mother had endured. She would be protected, loved, and raised by a woman of strength, not a victim of circumstance. Leah became her anchor and her North Star, while the world saw the Valdivia Empire managed by a discreet Swiss trust, Valdivia Global. The real decisions were made by Ariana from her command center in Geneva. She learned her grandfather's philosophy. He never sought the spotlight, but he controlled the stage from behind the curtain. He didn't just own the flashy tech firms, but the dark, essential ones that supplied their microchips, the shipping lines that carried their goods, and the real estate their headquarters were built on. He controlled the ecosystem. Ariana adopted this strategy. Guided by Arthur, she began moving her pieces on the global chessboard. Her first major move was in philanthropy. She established the Leah Foundation, a massively endowed organization dedicated to supporting women's shelters and providing educational scholarships for underprivileged children. The foundation, run by a professional board, quickly became a major force for good, but its enigmatic founder, known only by the initial AV, remained a complete mystery. It was her way of honoring the kindness she had been shown at Hope House, a karmic rebalancing of the scales. Meanwhile, she kept a close watch on New York. She had a private intelligence firm provide her with daily, detailed reports on De La Riva Holdings and the newly formed Sterling De La Riva Global. The merger had gone through. Lucas and Isabella were the new power couple of the jet set, their faces on the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg Businessweek. They were arrogant, successful, and completely oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Ariana began her campaign subtly, through a series of shell corporations and offshore holding companies. She started buying up debt in companies that were key suppliers to Sterling De La Riva. She heavily invested in a small, innovative competitor that was developing technology that would render Lucas's flagship product obsolete. She didn't attack him head-on. She began slowly and methodically buying up the ground beneath his feet. Her team marveled at her patience and strategic brilliance. She was a natural strategist. The timid girl was gone, replaced by a calculating, formidable mind. She learned to compartmentalize her emotions, to see the world as a complex system of assets and liabilities, opportunities and threats. 5 years passed. Leah was a bright, happy child, fluent in French and Spanish, oblivious to the power her mother wielded. Ariana was now 30 years old. She had traveled the world, negotiated multi-billion-dollar deals via secure video links, and commanded the respect of a small circle of the world's most powerful people, all while remaining a complete ghost to the public. One evening, Arthur Kensington sat with her on the terrace overlooking Lake Geneva. Leah was asleep upstairs. "You have mastered the empire, Ariana," he said, deep pride in his voice. "Your grandfather would be astonished. You are more than his heir. You are his successor." Ariana looked out at the tranquil water. "It is not enough to manage it from the shadows, Arthur. Anonymity was a shield while I was learning. Now it is an obstacle. To do what must be done now, they need to see me." Arthur nodded slowly. "Are you ready? Returning to New York will mean facing him." Ariana's expression was serene, but her eyes held a glint of glacial resolve. Lucas De La Riva threw his pregnant wife into the rain because she was a liability. He needs to meet the asset he created. The plan was set. The Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, annual charity gala, the pinnacle of the New York social scene, was in 3 weeks. The event chairmen this year were none other than Lucas and Isabella De La Riva. It was the perfect stage. The world had forgotten Ariana De La Riva. They were about to meet AV, Ariana Valdivia. The Titan had been forged. Now it was time for her to return. The triumphant entrance and the reckoning, the MoMA was ablaze with light, a modern palace hosting the gods and titans of New York society. The air buzzed with the chime of crystal, the murmur of powerful conversations, and the flash of paparazzi bulbs on the red carpet. At the center of this glittering universe stood Lucas and Isabella De La Riva. Lucas, at 40, was more formidable than ever. His empire, Sterling De La Riva Global, was a behemoth. He was the king of his world, and Isabella, swathed in emeralds and a custom Dior, was his queen. They moved through the crowd with the effortless arrogance of those who believe themselves to be untouchable. The Valdivia Global donation was stunning. A board member was effusively praising them. $10 million, and anonymously, They just said it was on behalf of their new CEO, who wishes to remain private for now. Isabella sniffed with disdain. Old money hiding from the modern world. Probably some dusty heir who's never worked a day in their life. Lucas smirked, nodding in agreement. He was a self-made man. He despised inherited wealth, even as he desperately craved its legitimacy. A subtle silence fell over the room. First, a ripple that started near the grand entrance and spread outward. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. A presence had arrived, one that commanded attention without asking for it. A woman stood at the top of the grand staircase. She wore a simple, elegant gown of deep sapphire silk that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her only jewelry was a breathtaking necklace of flawless diamonds cascading down her collarbone, a piece so magnificent it made Isabella's emeralds look like trinkets. Her dark hair was swept up in a sophisticated chignon, and her posture radiated quiet, unshakable confidence. No one knew who she was. She was not a celebrity, not a known socialite, but she moved with an aura of power that was palpable. She descended the stairs, her movements fluid and deliberate. The crowd parted for her, as if by an invisible force. Her eyes, cold and analytical, scanned the room before settling on the hosts. She began walking directly toward Lucas and Isabella. Isabella felt a prickle of irritation. Who was this woman stealing her spotlight? She nudged Lucas. "Do you know her?" Lucas stared, a strange sense of familiarity stirring in the back of his mind. There was something about the way she moved, the structure of her face. But it was impossible. The woman he was thinking of was a ghost, a pathetic memory he had buried long ago. That woman was weak, broken. This woman was a force of nature. She stopped a few feet away from them. A polite, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. Her gaze was fixed on Lucas. "Hello, Lucas," she said. Her voice was different, lower, richer, with a faint, unidentifiable European accent. But it was undeniably the same voice that had once whispered she loved him. Color drained from Lucas's face. His glass of champagne trembled in his hand. The confident CEO, the master of the universe, looked like he had seen a ghost. "Ariana." He breathed the name, a choked whisper of disbelief. Isabella's perfectly made-up face contorted in confusion, then realization and horror. "Ariana, your little mouse, your first wife, impossible." Ariana's gaze shifted to Isabella, and it was like being pinned by a shard of ice. "Mrs. de la Riva," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness. "Isabella, you look well. Stress seems to agree with you." The gala host, the museum director, rushed over, sensing a shift in the gravity of the room. "Lucas, Isabella, I see you've met our benefactor." He turned to Ariana with a beaming smile. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce the new CEO of Valdivia Global, the woman responsible for tonight's incredible donation. This is Ms. Ariana Valdivia." The name dropped into the silence like a bomb. Valdivia. The mythical, billion-dollar empire. The reclusive, powerful family. The collective gasp was audible. Lucas stared at her, his mind struggling to connect the dots. The penniless orphan he had thrown onto the street was a Valdivia. It was a logical impossibility, a nightmare come to life. "Valdivia," he stammered. "But you had nothing." "I had nothing that you valued," Ariana corrected him calmly, her voice resonating in the sudden silence. "There is a significant difference." Isabella, recovering from the shock, stepped forward, her eyes blazing with venom. "What is this? Some kind of trick? Did you marry some decrepit old Valdivia and take his name?" Ariana's smile did not waver. "Alistair Valdivia was my grandfather. I am his blood, his only heir." The finality of her statement hung in the air, irrefutable and devastating. The whispers around them erupted into a roar of speculation. The story was instantly reconstructed by the city's most ruthless gossips. The powerful Lucas de la Riva had divorced his unknown, orphaned wife years ago, only for her to reveal herself as the heir to one of the world's largest fortunes. It was a scandal of epic proportions. Lucas felt the floor tilt beneath him. Every eye in the room was on him, a mixture of pity, glee, and contempt. His perfectly constructed image was shattering in real time. He looked at Ariana. He truly looked at her and saw none of the broken girl he remembered. He saw a stranger, a polished, powerful, utterly terrifying stranger, who looked at him not with hatred or pain, but with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. "It was a pleasure to support the museum," Ariana said, addressing the host, but keeping her eyes locked on Lucas. "I believe in preserving beautiful things from the past, but I also believe in progress, in the future. Some things, some people, simply become obsolete." With one last contemptuous glance that stripped him of all his power, she turned away. She was immediately enveloped by the city's elite, all desperate to know the new sun in their solar system. Lucas and Isabella were left standing in her wake, isolated in the center of the room. The air around them was thick with their humiliation. Isabella's face was a mask of fury. She shot Lucas a look of pure disgust. "You are an idiot," she hissed. "An absolute fool. You threw away a Valdivia." Lucas couldn't respond. He only watched Ariana, the woman he had discarded as trash, hold court with the effortless grace of a queen. The storm he had pushed her into 5 years ago had not destroyed her. It had watered the seeds of a titan. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the core that she had not returned to New York for a social visit. She had returned to collect a debt. Black pawn checkmate. The collapse of an empire. The fallout from the gala was immediate and brutal. The story of the billionaire heiress and the foolish millionaire was on every blog, in every gossip column, and whispered in every boardroom. Lucas de la Riva, the ruthless self-made man, was recast overnight as a short-sighted fool who had thrown away a literal fortune. The narrative was intoxicating, and it stuck. Sterling de la Riva's stock dipped a few points, a tremor before the earthquake. Ariana did not strike fast. That would have been too merciful. Instead, she began a death by 1,000 cuts, a masterclass in corporate warfare that was as elegant as it was devastating. The first blow was subtle. The innovative tech competitor she had been secretly funding for years, Nexus Dynamics, released its new processing chip. It was twice as fast and half the cost of Sterling de la Riva's flagship product. Within a month, major clients began canceling their contracts with Lucas, defecting to Nexus. Sterling de la Riva's Q4 projections plummeted. Lucas and Isabella scrambled to react, but they were playing catch-up. They attempted to acquire Nexus Dynamics, only to discover it had been bought outright the week prior by a private holding company. A holding company owned by Valdivia Global. Next, Ariana targeted the supply chain. Key companies whose debt she had been acquiring for years suddenly called in their loans to Sterling de la Riva all at once. They refused to renegotiate terms, demanding immediate payment and disrupting the flow of essential materials. Production lines faltered. Orders were delayed. The market began to see Lucas's company not just as unlucky, but as unstable. Isabella was furious, her partnership with Lucas fracturing under the immense pressure. Their fights became legendary within their own glass-walled offices. "This is your fault," she would scream. "Your past is poisoning our future." Lucas was a man under siege. He saw Ariana's ghost hand in every setback. He would see her at industry events, always composed, always ringed by admirers. Her cold gaze would occasionally drift toward him with an unnerving lack of emotion. She never spoke to him, never acknowledged him beyond a polite nod. The psychological toll was immense. He was being dismantled by a phantom. The final checkmate move targeted the heart of his empire, the massive Oceanus shipping project, a joint venture that was supposed to be the crowning achievement of the Sterling de la Riva merger. It was heavily leveraged, dependent on a consortium of international banks for its funding. A week before the final funding round was secured, an explosive report was leaked to the Wall Street Journal. It was an environmental impact study, meticulously researched and devastatingly thorough, revealing the project would cause irreparable harm to a protected marine ecosystem. The report also contained leaked emails from Lucas, cruelly dismissing environmental concerns as tree-hugger nonsense that could be buried in paperwork. The public outcry was massive. ESG, environmental, social, and governance investors pulled out en masse. The banking consortium withdrew its funding offer. The Oceanus project, the very foundation of Sterling de la Riva Global, collapsed overnight. Its stock didn't just fall, it cratered. In a single day, Sterling de la Riva lost 60% of its value. Margin calls were triggered. The empire Lucas had spent his life building was insolvent. That night, Lucas found Isabella in their penthouse, her bags packed. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice hollow. "My father is rescuing what's left of Sterling Corp," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "He's cutting this toxic merger. He's cutting you. Our marriage is over, Lucas. I bet on a losing horse." She left without looking back, leaving him alone in the silent, opulent tomb he had built. 2 days later, his assistant informed him he had a visitor. He walked into the Sterling de la Riva boardroom. The name on the wall felt like a joke. Sitting at the head of the long table where he used to sit was Ariana. She looked up as he entered, her expression composed. "Hello, Lucas. Please take a seat." He was a broken man. The arrogance was gone, replaced by haggard desperation. "Ariana, why?" he pleaded. "Was all this for revenge? To destroy me?" "Destroy you?" she said, a flash of something unreadable in her eyes. "No, this was never about you. You think you're the main character in this story, but you were just the catalyst. You taught me a valuable lesson that night in the rain. Never leave your fate in someone else's hands. You forced me to be self-sufficient. You wanted a queen for your dynasty. Well, I built my own." She gestured to the papers in front of her. "Valdivia Global, through its subsidiaries, now holds the majority of your company's debt. We also own a controlling interest in your shares, which we bought for pennies this morning. As of 9:15 a.m., I am, to all intents and purposes, your boss. And your landlady, as I now own this building." Lucas sank into a chair, the finality of his defeat crushing him. "I have a son, Ariana," he whispered, a desperate final plea. "A daughter. Her name is Leah. Doesn't she deserve to know her father?" It was the first time he had acknowledged his child, the first time he had spoken her name. Ariana's face hardened, the composure finally cracking to reveal the bedrock of cold fury beneath. "You have no right to say her name," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Her father was a brilliant man named Miguel Valdivia, who chose love over a fortune. My daughter has a wonderful legacy. She doesn't need the De La Riva name." She stood, the picture of absolute power. "You will resign from the board with immediate effect. In exchange for your full cooperation, I will not press criminal charges for the financial fraud we uncovered during our due diligence. You will keep enough to live, but not enough to matter. You will become a loose end." She used his own words against him. The final, perfect twist of the knife. He stared at her, the woman he had created, and who had in turn unmade him. He saw no path to redemption, no hope for forgiveness. He had sown the wind, and now he had reaped the whirlwind. Ariana walked out of the boardroom and did not look back. She took the elevator down to the ground floor, where her car was waiting. As she stepped out into the bright New York afternoon, her phone vibrated. It was a video call from Geneva. Leah's smiling face popped onto the screen. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" A warm, genuine smile transformed Ariana's face, melting the icy CEO and revealing the loving mother. "I'm on my way now, my love. My work here is finished." The reckoning was over. It wasn't about destroying Lucas. It was about closing a chapter. It was about ensuring that no one could ever hold power over her or her daughter again. She hadn't just taken back her life. She had built an empire on the foundations of her own resilience, securing a future not of revenge, but of purpose for herself and her daughter, Leah. A final reflection. Interaction and CTA. Ariana's journey was not just about the change from poverty to wealth. It was about the forging of an unbreakable spirit. She transformed her deepest pain into her greatest power. The man who saw her as a disposable accessory inadvertently engineered his own downfall by underestimating the woman he threw away. Her story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by how others treat us, but by how we rise after we fall. She didn't just reclaim her life. She built an empire upon the bedrock of her own resilience, securing a future not of vengeance, but of purpose for herself and her daughter Leah. It is a testament to the idea that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining it all. If Ariana's incredible story of transformation and empowerment resonated with you, please show your support by hitting the like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next unforgettable story. What part of Ariana's journey inspired you the most? Let us know in the comments.